Still recovering.
Oh, you already did?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. So we're good. We're good.
Okay, cool.
All right. So it started at 8:45, right?
So this is not the first.
No, it's
presentation?
gonna be the. This is gonna be the second.
It's this one. And then like I mean, the rest of it is just like, I mean, you guys can switch the PowerPoints out, I guess, when they, if that what you'll do, switch out the PowerPoints when they,
Yeah.
when the speakers come
Okay.
up. That's all we need to do. Everything else is good to go. Everything's working.
So it's already recording, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Very.
Yeah. Oh, nice to meet you.
Oh, okay. It's double. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I should have showed up.
Yeah.
So this is software. Data and software, right? So I'll be, this is the signing, sheet, so I'll just pass it around, make sure you all sign. Sign me. We have 3 great presentations in the next 90 minutes. So we'll get started. The first speaker is gonna be Mr. Matt Glazer. He's with Arcadis. He boasts over a decade of experience in traffic incident management, big data utilization, and TMC operations. His tenure in key roles at the Georgia Department of Transportation equipped him with a deep understanding of public sector procedures and policies. Matt's expertise extends to procuring and overseeing multiple support services, contracts in transportation system management, and operations. Some noteworthy achievements for Matt include pioneering the nation's first comprehensive signal performance system, the first speed heating cloud-based approach to connected vehicle applications, and managing the internationally awarded Georgia Joint Agency Data Acquisition and Management Program. So, Matt, thank you for coming in. Go ahead.
Appreciate it. So this is a small crowd, so you can heckle the other speakers, not me. I appreciate you guys showing up this morning. Glad everyone was having a good time yesterday. So I think some of you probably seen parts of this before. My apologies, but I don't care. For those of you that have or that haven't seen it, great. I'm excited to hop into this with you. So before I dive into my wonderful map, number one, and so this is going to require participation. All you got to do is like raise your hand. So raise your hand if you work in Georgia at some point. Okay, wonderful. That's most of you. All right. Raise your hand if you if you are a transportation planner. Keep them raised. If you're a if you're a traffic engineer specifically, if you're a road design engineer. Okay, this presentation applies to you. So that's everybody in this room. Congratulations. So let's do some real world examples for those of you that have worked in Georgia for real world projects. So, hey, Arcadis, you all are doing this really cool I-85 study project. That's really awesome. And if you're doing that and you're a planner, you are probably going out into the world and getting a bunch of trip analytics data or origin destination data, and you're probably taking a guess to where your origins are and where your destinations are, so you can kind of get this big map to go buy that data, right? And that's what it looks like. And so if you're doing that via task order, it takes time, it takes money to do all that. It's pushed into a direct expense to the department. Then many of you were probably working on the 400 Express project. And very similarly, you were probably asking yourself, well, where are people getting on and where are they getting off? And perhaps there's a new entrance ramp that may need to be put in. Perhaps we want to suggest something from the design build perspective that would increase toll revenue for us in the long haul, right? So off again, you go and get your origin destination data for this wonderful green little blob that's right there. And then if you're working in Cobb County and you're getting hate mail from a bunch of citizens talking about the Northwest Corridor, and they're saying, my God, this is clogging our streets somehow, then you might do something similarly, right? You go out and get origin destination data, figure out where people are going. Are there now trucks on your thoroughfares and your local streets? Trying to explain all of this. And then if you're the Buckhead CID and you're trying to figure out the dreaded triangle at Piedmont and was that State Route 9, where are people coming to? How are they getting there? How are people traversing your area? How are you going to make it better? That's all well and good, right? And all of those are led up by individual teams, individual projects that are all paying a direct expense to go out and buy that data individually. And the reason that's expensive, as you can kind of see by this visual, is that you're double, triple, or quadruplicating that cost, right? Why weren't you just sharing all of this in the front end? Well, the reason that you weren't, in the old way of doing this, and quite frankly, the way that most DOTs across the entire country are set up, is that you're doing this project by project, on a project by project basis. And again, no one's doing anything bad, but you just take that direct expense, it's hidden inside your project, and it's very hard to figure out how much money is actually being spent. But again, you're doubling and you're tripling up on that cost. And so what GDOT, what ARC are looking at, right, is, well, let's look at this from more than just an OD standpoint. Let's look at this from all these different data attributes. And you don't need to understand and stare at this table to care about this. But what you should be taking away, and let me see if I can get my laser pointer, right, is up here, your different groups within DOT, within ARC, within CERTA. They all have the exact same needs. If you kind of cross your eyes real quick and just look for colors, right, there's not a lot of white that's on here in a single row. And if you as an organization are going out and buying these things in your individual organizational silos, meaning GDOT planning, GDOT OTD, traffic ops, then again, you're missing that opportunity to be sharing that data and therefore doubling up, tripling up, quadrupling up on those expenses that are then just taking away from really cool projects that you can be doing. And so that's really the crux of this challenge that we all have. And again, this is not just GDOT, this is not just ARC, this is every DOT across the country. This is how they were set up, was to deliver projects. And so they got together, they said, we don't want to do this anymore. And so they wanted to start looking at how probe data, how trip analytics, how volume analytics, how energy use and emissions data could all be shared amongst these different groups. And the reason that this is important, right, is that we're all, again, I'm a traffic ops guy. Where my head goes, having grown up in that world, was SIGOps. How am I going to be using this for bottleneck analysis? And that's where we go. But there's a lot more that you can start digging into. And I think that's the important piece of this. And this is what we want to share across the board, is that when we start pulling out a little bit, when we start looking at all the different wonderful questions that we can start asking, you know, with a single data set that we have, as being your traditional speed data set, think of Google Maps, green, yellow, red, right? you can start doing a whole lot more, and you can start doing a whole lot more, not just in traffic operations, but within planning, within road design, within construction, starting to figure out what you can do. And I think specifically, the pieces, right, that where we think about this from the traffic ops world was kind of originally right here. I want to understand this, how long it takes me to get from point A to point B on the interstate. But if you're in the construction world, and this is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and certainly with the 400 Express project, for any of the folks that were working on that, was how long can I keep my people out on the road before it starts negatively impacting traffic? Can I stretch into 7:30, 8 o'clock, or am I pushing that too far? Can I start a little bit earlier? Can I start a little bit later, right? You're starting to drive that by data rather than just a spec that says thou shalt not start before 9 p.m., right? And so this is the way that you start answering that question. Similarly, right, trip analytics data, the origin destination is not just for planners, right? And again, here are some use cases that I think, when we're thinking about this from the ARC side, I'm staring right at Regan with this, right, is, well, we got to do our travel demand model. We got to figure out, we want to do a regional freight plan. This is what it's all about. How are trucks getting around, and why is Amazon blocking my driveway and it's driving me crazy, right? But let's switch that back to, let's kind of switch it to the traffic ops world. How are people getting to the Taylor Swift concert? Where are they coming from? Or do I need to consider, bringing in police officers to help monitor a different corridor that we weren't previously looking at? So again, that's what this is really all about. And so what I want to do very quickly is just burn through some use cases again, so that you can start thinking about what this looks like in a very real world for your individual applications. So in this particular case, this was a look at Cobb Parkway, specifically about what's causing user delay. Is it really traffic signals, or is it really caused by bottlenecks that are just out there that we can't do anything about, as opposed to just taking a wild guess and insisting that it's one single place? We can start looking into it on a month by month, day by day, hour by hour basis. And in this particular case, the answer was, well, yeah, we actually have a ton of delay out here caused by traffic signals, and we need to fix that. What I don't have on here is the next year where that plummeted after this was discovered. And I think that's really important. But again, if you're going out there and you're getting calls from citizens insisting that there are, problems all up and down State Route 54, it's not to say that they're wrong, but sometimes they're not seeing the full picture, right? They're trying to get on the interstate. It's terrible. It's bad. They're thinking that the delay is right there, but without having to go out there and start collecting a bunch of data that's very expensive. If you are working in Georgia, this data already exists for you, it's ready for you to use. You can start hopping in and take a look at this from a bird's eye view, understand the differences between November and October and December and 1 o'clock in the morning versus 1 o'clock in the afternoon, figuring out where your bottlenecks are. And so again, for the folks that are in, SIGOps, this is where you kind of come up with your strategy for getting your signal timing done, right? It takes a long time to deploy a full-blown signal retime. But if you could fix an offset right there, you've made a lot of people happy. And you've solved 30% of a problem without ever having stepped foot in a field. But you can take that a step further, right? So if you were in the operational improvement world, if you were in the planning world, this is something where you take all of those bottlenecks and you start weaving them together and you say, again, where are my problems? You're going to get citizen hate mail. We all do, especially if you're at the DOT, if you're in the city, saying this intersection's the worst. It's driving me absolutely crazy. And I'll pick on my former colleagues who I worked with at DOT. If you looked at operational improvements for, we'll call it between 2000 and 2015, they were probably somewhere along the route of the district engineer going to and from work, the district traffic engineer going to or from work, or the state traffic engineer going to or from work, right? So it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's a limited view. And so again, right, we take all of that information, we synthesize it across the board and say, this is where we actually need to go. This is where it's actually, driving an impact to our citizens. Same data set. I haven't even gotten off it, right? If you were in the safety world, speeding is a big problem. And, certainly coming out of COVID, people were going crazy. But where is it happening? How do we know how bad the problem is? Is it just because you have one noisy citizen, or is it in fact that bad? I don't know if you can actually, if it shows up very well, but at the time, I-20 was the worst. And in this particular case, the question was, how many people are going 10 miles per hour or more over the speed limit? And the answer was 87% of people are. So yeah, that's kind of a problem. We should try to figure out what we can do. This is an opportunity to engage local PD or state PD to perhaps do some enforcement out there to prevent crashes, and not just crashes, but what are going to be quite certainly very deadly crashes and very costly accidents or crashes. If you are in the construction world, if you are in the road design world, a big question, that comes after your project is, well, what was the impact of all this? Now, this particular question or this particular view was for COVID, but there's no reason you can't do this if for the 400-285 Express project or interchange project that just got completed. And a picture's worth 1,000 words. It's great to say, oh yeah, things got 5% better. But in this particular case, you could, we looked at the entire metropolitan area and said, how have things changed? And if they're in green over here on the right, they have significantly improved. If they were pink, if they were red, if they were purple, they would have gotten worse. But this was very much a way during COVID that you could provide day-by-day updates of, hey, have we returned to normal? And again, right, if looking at all that green, people were running a lot faster. The answer was no, traffic's not back to normal. We're still seeing a lot less traffic. I'll switch back to safety for a second, and I'll switch over to bike and peds, right? You don't necessarily need bike and ped data to figure out whether or not you want to do bike and ped projects, right? And more importantly, whether or not you can. And, I'll raise my hand. I'm a guilty, traffic signal engineer. If someone like Ron was like, hey, can we do a cycle track? I'd be like, no, you're going to ruin my flow on this corridor. Are you mad? I'm very selfish about that. To use Ken Fink's words, they're just squishies. They're just in the way, just let me get cars up and down the corridor. Regan's nodding her head in disapproval at me. But this is a very quick way of determining, is there capacity, right? And I'll give the shout out. This was actually done by AECOM, and it was a way of just looking up and down the corridor to say, this segment of Northside Drive or this segment of North Avenue, you have capacity when we're looking at this. We're doing this, this macro level view. This could be a good candidate. Let's investigate further. And I went through this with some before and afters, right? But and I think this is important to say to you guys, right? Doing a before and after does not have to be a labor-intensive activity where you're pulling all types of crazy data and you're spending hours and hours and hours. This type of report takes an hour. It's built into PowerPoint, which I think we all got to help us know how to use. It's using Excel to make it all work. But again, it's backed by the big data that GDOT and ARC are purchasing for you. If you're trying to understand what a crash did on your interstate, right? How quickly did we respond? Again, the data exists. What did it cost us in user delay? Is this something that demands of us a better response period? Still go back to my example with Buckhead. How are people getting to the core of Buckhead? What's the most common route? If you're, the way that we're doing this, especially if you are, a smaller scale project that has a limited budget, right, is that you're just going to go with known areas that are problematic, right? But in this particular case, right, I think this is key here is, are we looking at these routes? Do we understand that there are other preferred alternatives to get to this area, and that it's not just, 400, that it's not just 75, 85 connector up there, right? You can do this analysis right now. Very easy. Takes you all of about 30 seconds to run this. Going back to my Taylor Swift analogy, an example, right? This was in fact the Taylor Swift concert. It was in Tennessee. How were people getting to the concert? What was the preferred route? And I think, and I apologize for the size of the numbers here, But you would think right here being your interstate that that's going to be your most popular route. And in fact, it was not. It was actually downtown, where over 40% of people were taking two bridges to get to the Titan Stadium. Why that matters to you, right, is how are you deploying to your police forces? How are you planning for the next major event? How are you planning for a Titans game, right? Taylor Swift is already gone, right? But we know that this is how people like to get to that concert. And then more importantly, when you're looking at that overall area, once they get to the parking lots, once they're kind of in that core area, how are they traversing around the parking areas? What's that all mean? So these are cases, they've been done. They took, each one of those took somewhere in the range of about an hour to help figure out, right? And that was because in my case, I was just messing around trying to come up with cute colors for them. So the point that I try to make with all these different use cases, right, is that there's not a person in here that cannot use at least one of those for a project that you have. And I won't call it any names, but there are plenty of people in this room that are not using these tools, right? They are free. They have been purchased for you. They are available. There's not a catch behind this. GDOT-ARC, they purchased them on your behalf and want you to go use them. And they don't want you to just use them for GDOT, and they don't want you to just use them for ARC. They want you to use them for Town Center CID. They want you to use them for City of Atlanta and Savannah and Columbus, right? As long as it's for a public serve, like as long as it's for a government agency, you are within your right to be using it for them. Let's flip through that. So why does this all matter? Sure, it makes, GDOT and ARC are nice. It's nice that they did this for you guys, right? But it's not just about them being nice. It's because it makes financial sense. So we go back to that slide that I shared you at the very beginning of this, which is they were already paying for this. And if you're City of Atlanta, and if you're DeKalb County, and if you're Gwinnett County, you were already paying for this. It's hidden in your projects. You just couldn't see it because it was a direct expense that was just a part of doing business. But when you start looking at this in terms of real actual dollars that could be allowing you to do one more safety project, that could be allowing you to do one more bike and ped project or one more operational improvement project, that's what this means, right? If you are, I keep picking on Gwinnett, right? If you are Gwinnett County, for the love of God, do not go out and buy origin destination data for another project because it's already been paid for. Use that savings and do another upgrade for your county. If you are Town Center CID, the same comment goes for you. It is real actual money that comes back to you that you no longer have to spend. But it's not just that financial benefit that you're getting, right? It's that you are starting to give yourself an opportunity to deviate from a standard that's set in the MUTCD or the AASHTO Green Book, not because you're doing anything nefarious, right? But it's everyone's favorite term is use your engineering judgment. This gives you your engineering judgment to do that, right? You have the data in front of you. You have days and days and days. In fact, this data goes back to 2017 that you can extract and pull for your projects. So go do it. Go pull it and say, this is actually what's out there. This is actually what we need. The MUTCD may be telling me that I need this type of treatment out there, but I actually, what we're seeing, we need to boost it. We need to do more there. Again, if you're a project that is not just the 400-285 Express project, but you're maybe a quick response project, you have the exact same tools. So use them. They're very quick. In fact, shout out to, colleague Otto Clemente. His go-to thing for every single project, regardless of the size, is having his team immediately hop into these tools and just start figuring out what they do. You have 4 hours, start pulling it out, tell us what we know. Tell us what we've learned. Doesn't matter if it's $2 million or 200,000. The other thing too, and again, right, if you're going back to your projects on a day-to-day basis, Regan, you're up here, so I'm going to ask you. Rewind the clock a few years. If you're going out and you're trying to get a new task order set up with the Atlanta Regional Commission, they say, hey, we want to do this freight study. We need you to go get this data. How long would it take you to go buy that data? 2-3 months, right? Right. That's 2 or 3 months that has just been saved in your project schedule. That's gone. It's evaporated. It's right? So use it, right? Use that opportunity to do more with your projects. Use the enhanced the enhanced analytics capabilities and the visualizations to tell a better story of what's happening in your area, not just for your executive leadership or your management, but to engage the public, right? I think Jason Dozier called us out yesterday, appropriately so, of, hey, we can be doing more to engage the public. Well, they're not going to understand engineer talk, but they're going to understand a picture, right? Use it. Putting this on from the standpoint of having worked at the DOT, this is also about transparency, right? The analytics that I run, what I'm going to tell Ron is, here's how I did it. And he has every ability to go back and fact check this. This is not a black box, right? He can go in and verify that the information I'm giving him is appropriate and makes sense, and that I'm not just making it up to be convenient to do the thing that I want to do. I think this all sounds like common sense, and I appreciate that is the way that Georgia has treated it. But again, right, this is not something that happens across the board. And so I think that my call to action for all of us, right, is we all work in more than just the state of Georgia, or most of us do. We work in Tennessee and North Carolina and Louisiana and Florida, right? This is a paradigm shift for the way that DOTs, county organizations function. And we know that by the fact that when we talk about this, it gets awarded by ITS World Congress and the Operations Center of Excellence, right? Because they see the value in this and they're trying to spread the word. So in that attempt, right? Hey, go spread the word. This is a good idea. There's not a catch to it. Like tell TDOT and Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, if you're working with them, that this makes sense. And I think the last piece, and this is a colleague that I work with up in Rhode Island, was more in the modeling world, but I did appreciate this, right? Which was, when I was coming at this from a trip analytics perspective, it was very much in the vein of a travel demand model and congestion management process. How do we do this, right? But, his takeaway with all of this was, well, we have this. But now that we have it, we get to ask ourselves questions. What else can we do with this data? And I think that really, in thinking about it, it is truly only limited to our imaginations here. It was not but a month ago that new tools came online for all of us that using these same data sets allow us to do energy emission analysis that would have, if you ever use the EPA MOVES model, is not easy and fun to use. There are now tools that allow you to do it in 10 seconds. With the same data set, it's paid for, it's done, it's ready for you to use, right? So if you were working on something that is CMAQ related or using carbon reduction funding, again, these types of tools help you do that. And again, it's only limited by the imagination that we have to push those forward. So with that, I think we have our next speaker. I appreciate y'all's time. Thank you for your attention.
Just a reminder, we're gonna have questions at the end, so write down any questions that you have for the speaker. I would like to invite the next speakers, Ron, Reagan, and Allison. I'll just quickly read a short bio. Ron Kenesevich, he's a traffic engineer and researcher currently working as the state safety engineering supervisor for GDOT. He used data-driven practice and leverage a safe system approach to reduce roadway fatalities in Georgia. Reagan Hammond is a certified planner and serves as VHP Transportation System Director, leading multimodal planning and traffic engineering teams to deliver transformative projects for communities across Georgia. And Allison Bell, she's a dedicated urban planner with almost 10 years of experience in local and regional transportation and community planning. So let's give them a round of applause. And
Morning, everybody. Thanks for coming to the session. I thought what Matt shared set a great stage for what we're going to talk about, which is utilization of some of that cool, exciting data. And it's for the rural statewide active transportation plan that Allison and I get to work with Ron on for the Department of Transportation. So we're going to talk about leveraging big data, telematic data for this planning project, but it's more than just a planning project. It's really about impacting positively biking and walking across Georgia, and particularly in areas of the state that traditionally have kind of been forgotten when it comes to bike and ped. So those rural areas of the state. So we'll talk about that today, and I'm going to kick it over to Ron for the next slide.
Sure. Yeah, I just want to say a couple things at
Yep.
the start. I'll speak again at the end, but 3 takeaways I want you guys to leave with. The first is what this rural active transportation plan is. I'm the state safety engineering supervisor, so we have the ability, need, or equity for those transportation facilities. Economic vitality is another big piece of it as well. Second takeaway is that we're leveraging telematic data, some of the data that Matt mentioned, in addition to other big data sets in conjunction together. I always find that leveraging this data with other data sets, particularly that ped bike data that might not be as reliable, when you leverage it in conjunction with other data sets, leverage for informed decisions. And then finally, much of this data has already been processed and put into a format that we can give to you to leverage.
All right, so just a little bit of setting the stage for this presentation and the plan that we're talking about. As I mentioned, the active transportation plan that we're doing at the statewide level is really focused on rural areas of the state. So that was our first challenge. We had to define what rural meant. And in this case, we're looking at all of the areas outside of metropolitan planning organization areas. So this map does not come through very well on this screen, but the 20 plus county metro Atlanta area, not really the focus of this plan. Areas down around Savannah, not necessarily the focus. It's everywhere in between, which actually represents a majority of the land area of the state of Georgia. We, really wanted not only for this to be a data-driven approach to really provide some backing for the decisions that are ultimately going to come out of this plan, but we also wanted it to be driven by best practices. So we have spent quite a bit of time at the front end, really understanding the lay of the land at the national scale, international, and bringing that down to benefit how we utilize data and other practices in development of this plan. We really are trying to focus on ways that we can engage stakeholders. Data, what Matt just talked about, is a great way to be able to visualize complicated information, and we're doing that and engaging with local jurisdictions, regional commissions, and the public through that. We're really trying to focus in on areas that have higher need and demand for active transportation accommodation across these rural areas. I think naturally we all kind of default to assume that, if somebody lives out in the country in a rural part of Georgia, nobody's going to bike or walk. But that's not necessarily true. And so we needed to utilize data to help us understand where are those places across a broad area of the state that have that higher need and demand. And that'll ultimately help the department prioritize where to invest limited transportation dollars, and as well help inform local jurisdictions and regional commissions on where they can prioritize their investment as well. ultimately, this is going to result in a strategic framework that the department can follow. And we are in the middle of this process, but are really focusing on this plan being action and outcome driven, not just a nice plan to sit on a shelf, or nobody puts plans on a shelf anymore. Everything's digital. But figuratively, we don't want this to sit on a shelf. We want this to result in projects, infrastructure improvements, improved safety outcomes, et cetera. And it's important that this all kind of align with GDOT's overall mission and the work that's being done by GDOT planning for the statewide strategic transportation plan. So that we're all kind of following the same tune and making sure that we're in alignment with those priorities. So on this map, you can see, you can't see the rural areas, but imagine where those are everywhere between the big cities. But the network that you see highlighted in colors is what we're calling our active transportation network. And this is really made up of the state designated bicycle routes. So how many people in this room knew that there was a network of bike routes across the state? All right, pretty good.
But how many people use this? How many people use this? Okay.
Yeah, so the state bike route network really kind of took shape back in the 90s. And since that time, there really hasn't been a lot of investment in the infrastructure along those networks. So we've been using this data informed process to really take a deep look at that network and understand how effective it is, and where we can make some improvements. Those yellow lines are US bike routes, and the pink is the East Coast Greenway that's under development right now. So you can really look at these as the spokes, and the hubs are the small communities across rural Georgia that we're trying to connect. So we started off trying to identify, what are our long-term goals and outcomes? So we developed guiding principles, and Ron hinted at these a few minutes ago. Safety, #1 priority. Bikes and peds are vulnerable road users. They're disproportionately impacted when a crash takes place, typically are going to be more likely to be seriously injured or killed when experiencing a crash. So we really wanted to focus on safety. Connectivity. So how are we getting people connected between communities and with each other across areas of the state? Most of the time we're focused on bike and ped as short distance trips, but there is a demand for long distance travel, particularly by bike. So how can we help improve that connectivity? From a mobility standpoint, think about that as your short trips. How are we improving the ability for people who don't have a car to be able to get to their work or higher education or even their high school in a community? How are we helping people who want to make a change and live a more active lifestyle and start biking and walking within their community? So that's where we focused on mobility. We've heard it in some sessions this last couple of days. Georgia's the #1 business state to do business in. We want to keep supporting that through this planning effort. So how can we strengthen rural communities and economies through infrastructure dedicated to and improvements dedicated towards biking and walking? And particularly, how can we boost the economy of tourism in this state, which we do get a lot of long distance bike travel that helps support these small communities through, those bikers spending the night, buying their dinners while they take a break and before they get back on the road. And then to the point of need, there are a lot of people in rural communities who, for various reasons, don't have the option to have a car of their own. And so how can we help them be mobile, be successful in their life, have access to opportunity? And so looking at need has been very important. So data-driven approach. Historically in bicycle and pedestrian planning and infrastructure development, we've relied on opinions. We've relied on maybe you might have some data on where a sidewalk is or a desire path is. You might have historical crash data, but bike and ped planning and engineering has always suffered from the lack of really good data to help make informed decisions and really to justify investment. So we doubled down on data in this planning effort so far, and to really answer some of those questions that we had around connectivity, safety, bicycle level of comfort, and utilizing it to support our engagement and also inform the public. So I'm going to turn it over to Allison, who's going to talk about how we use the big data and telematic data to answer some of our questions around these topic areas.
Oh, am I switching just like this? Or okay. Okay. So kind of how we're, like Regan just said, we use a data-driven approach from the very beginning and every aspect of this project. So, I think we've used everything from just like traditional census data to, numeric, obviously, to again, also to kind of these more big data. And that's going to be the focus of what I talk about today. But could do dozens of other sessions about all the other data sets that we use in this project and pulled together to really paint a picture of active transportation in the state of Georgia. But so today we'll focus on kind of the big data that we use, which was primarily Replica and Strava, which, if you're a runner, if you're a biker, you're probably familiar with Strava. And then, Replica, I think, is kind of the new like hot data topic recently, more recently, that is really a useful tool across a lot of our projects. So again, going back to that sort of data-driven approach, one way that we kind of use some of those, just to show an example of this, how we did and how you could apply this in a project that you use, is we did set up through Esri Experience Builder. We set up a data viewer for this project, so it's super easy for if we're in a meeting with Ron, with GDOT, or with stakeholders, or just internally, we can just pull it up. We don't have to wait for like ArcPro to load, and wait 30 minutes to pull all that up. So it's really super easy to just pull all the data up, and everybody that's working on the project has access to it. So from the beginning, we've had that kind of data-driven approach in mind. And so one way, just like kind of a snapshot or preview of how we applied the big data, specifically Replica data, was through looking at existing need, which was based primarily on, kind of like active transportation propensity data sets that we pulled from a variety of sources and put that index together ourselves. But then layering that with existing demand that we pulled from Replica using like the origin and destination data from Replica. And so looking at, where's the need, where's the existing demand, and where's that overlap, and where does it not overlap, and it needs to. So that's just kind of a little preview of how we use it. But so to start off the rural active transportation plan, like Regan said, of course, like we started with a good foundation of just this pretty intensive best practices review to make sure that like what we're doing that is, we have our fingers on the pulse of like what's the best that's been done, that the latest that's been done, to make sure that we're not just doing it the same way it's always been done, just because that's how it's always been done. So layering on top of that, we started our existing conditions assessment, which then kind of rolled into our needs assessment, which we're kind of currently wrapping up and moving into our recommendations. So that's where we are in the project. But for the existing conditions assessment, it was kind of, and I really hate that this is not showing it well for y'all, but we kind of have this layer, this Venn diagram. It's layering the three major pieces of the existing conditions assessment, which was connectivity. So where's the demand, where's the need, safety, of course, and then the bicycle level of comfort. So the condition that maybe makes it more comfortable or less comfortable to ride a bike on that route. And so again, could go into all the different ways that we use data across all of this. But the ones highlighted in yellow are the ones we're going to talk about today, where we really kind of leverage that big data from like Replica. So focusing on the demand piece of the connectivity assessment and some key pieces of our safety risk assessment where we plugged in that big data. So looking at our demand assessment or connectivity assessment, the demand piece. So we put together kind of our own, just based on best practices review and all of that. And we had the data on hand already. We did put together our own internal like demand index that we kind of use as like looking at, you know, key destinations, population centers, employment activity centers, things like that. To kind of look at where's the potential demand for active transportation usage across rural Georgia. But then we kind of also layered that or like kind of back checked it with the observed and modeled demand data that we have access to through Replica. And you know, what we found is that they matched pretty well. So that was always good to kind of check that. And then as we did kind of zoom in and dig deeper, we're able to use that like in the needs assessment, and I'll get into that in just a second. We were kind of able to use more of that observed and modeled demand data from Replica to really hone in on where the needs are. Another way that we used Replica data was through the land use mix, which was a key attribute of our of both our safety risk assessment and also the demand analysis and pulling where the existing demand is. And so what we did here was pull the land use data from Replica, which has all of these land use categories, and assign that to block groups. So we were able to see like where the land use mix along current the US bike routes. And for the connectivity assessment, we related that. We related the land use data from the block groups to the hexagons that you'll see in the maps in a few minutes. And that really just helped it kind of look easier to digest and understand. And so again, mentioned the safety risk assessment, which was a big part of the existing conditions assessment, which was just looking at it, the whole system from a safety perspective and looking at all of these different risk factors that you know, added all together, the presence of them or lack thereof, to put together into a risk score for each of the segments across the rural areas, including the state bike routes, US bike routes, and just the entire state route network. So we have a pretty comprehensive safety picture of the state from this risk assessment. And like I mentioned before, one of the key things that we used in the safety risk assessment was the land use mix, which we were able to have access to through Replica. And then another isn't necessarily tied specifically to Replica or Strava, but we through our safety risk assessment, we're able to pull together like a crash probability and cost spreadsheet, which helped us determine, you know, based on all of these risk factors, to put a number to that crash probability of the crashes that could happen per year. And if those risk factors are addressed, the amount of cost savings that could be associated with that. And so moving kind of from existing conditions into like needs assessment and kind of that data-driven decision-making, we really relied on Replica and Strava data to layer on top of our existing conditions analyses to help identify opportunities across the state that are really, you know, in need of where the opportunity lies to really direct GDOT into making active transportation investments. So from Replica, we you see it on the far left, and that we really relied on that short distance and bike ped trip volume. So like, where do we need to make those mobility investments, like what Regan was talking about with the guiding principles, within communities. And we also, from Replica, really relied on that long distance, so like more than 5 miles, bike ped trip volume to really look at the connectivity. So, connecting between 2 different rural hubs or making connections from the rural areas to the MPOs. And then also relied on Strava for that recreational bike ped trip volume, which again is like their recreational bike and ped trips, but a lot of times was really helpful in looking at what are some of the longer bike trips that are happening and where they have, like, where are people choosing to ride their bikes on these longer trips because it's more comfortable there. And so just an example, and I'm gonna pick on Americus. I don't know if anybody is here from Americus area, but it kind of is just one of the best visual examples to show. But so on the upper left square, you can see where we find in those kind of dark green hexes are where there's like the highest demand, highest need. And that we've used kind of using the data set that I showed y'all previously. And so layering on top of that, where these purple lines here are Strava data of where their actual recreational bike trips are happening today that people are logging. And then layering that also with looking at in the bottom left here, looking at Replica data of those longer distance bike trip volumes. So again, which direction and where are they taking these longer trips? And so what is the connection that needs to happen? So this green line is just an example. It's not exactly where we're proposing a connection, but based on these purple lines where they are, and based on where these longer bike ped trips are happening from the Replica data, is the connection, maybe the connection it needs to go this way to connect to the existing US bike route. Maybe the connection, you can also see some purple lines coming, I should use this, but coming down south to connect to the MPO, like maybe that's the connection that needs to be made. So that's kind of just one way that we've really layered all of these data sets together to really look at where where those connections need to be made. And then another analysis that we've done is the trail. We've had a series of kind of smaller like sub-analyses going on while we're doing the sort of larger needs assessment. And one of those is the trail crossing assessment. I'm going to let Ron speak more to that.
Cool. Yeah, so as Allison said, in addition to the overarching plan related to the state bike routes, we're doing more systemic strategies to apply across the state. It's requiring that big data to be leveraged to prioritize them. Can't put your investment on every trail across the entire state. So what we did was we leveraged the crash risk and probabilities from that data that Allison just mentioned, plus that telematic data from those smartphones, location-based services, overlaying that with crash probability as well. So even if you have doubts about whether we should be using that location-based services due to accuracy, combining it with other data sets as well. And I always think that's a really important piece to make those data-driven decisions. So see an even weighting of those 4 different groups to help us choose our 10 rural trails that we intend to do a trail crossing analysis on. See these 10 trails here. And we've already started one. This was actually an urban trail we did a study on called Stone Mountain Trail in Atlanta. This is a little outside the rural active transportation plan, but bringing those practices into these rural facilities as well. We were actually caught on Google Maps, which is where that photo is. Improvements for those trails will include things like pedestrian hybrid beacons, where there's just a traditional crosswalk on higher speed, higher lane number roadways, rapid flashing beacons on the lower speed, lower lane number roadways, and sometimes just pavement marking enhancements, optical speed bars to indicate that you should slow down, pedestrian crossing or trail crossing markings, and green paint whenever there's the opportunity for mode split. So as we continue throughout this plan, we'll be leveraging that big data in a variety of different ways. We're going to find more opportunities and needs for us to program projects or for local governments to apply for funding for those projects. This plan is really intended to lead to projects that are implemented. more systemic initiatives like this, trail crossing analysis. We have a variety of others, one related to school zones, one related to island connectivity, and much more. That big data is going to be used to help prioritize our funding in those areas. As we look to award funding to local communities as well who apply for those, such as programs such as the Transportation Alternatives Program, this data is going to help help our high up, officials at GDOT award that funding and prioritize it to places that. Finally, for monitoring evaluation, that's a really critical piece to show where we're getting our return on investment for these types of projects. Where is it inducing more demand when we provide those pedestrian improvements? So looking at previous projects where these type of improvements have already been installed. So to tie it all back to those three key takeaways I mentioned at the beginning, this rural active transportation plan, it's got focus on safety, but there's much more than that. There's activity, mobility, economic vitality, and need. We leverage that telematic data from those smartphones in conjunction with other data sets to make our data informed decisions. And we processed all this data in that ArcGIS web viewer that Allison showed, or the crash prediction model spreadsheet that are available tools for you guys to leverage to help local agencies prioritize their projects as well. Thank you guys very much. I'd love to take any questions you have. Thank you for having me on.
So we're gonna have our third and last presentation. So I would like to invite Dr. Schumann Ginn. He's a principal researcher engineer in the School of Civil Engineering at Georgia Tech. Dr. Ginn research is broadly in the area of traffic operation, connected and autonomous vehicles, and machine learning. For the past 20 years, he has been working with vehicle detection technology, and today he's presenting on drone technology.
All right. So Matt, Ron, Regan, Allison, all of us, they talked about big data. I'm going to talk about small data. Okay. So once you have looked at the big data, looked at the statewide problems, you brought it down to an intersection or a corridor that you need to improve for safety or persons, whatever. What's next? Right? You need more detailed data, more detailed analysis for that zone. Typically use simulation for that. And so that's the use case I'll use here for most of the presentation today. But where does drone fit in? It means those bridge engineers always are excited about drones, like all the digital twins that they can do with the LiDAR data attached to the drones and so on. But we traffic engineers, transportation engineers are not too far behind. We have been using drones for collecting high resolution traffic data. This one. So this is the use case for simulation, where what are the typical data that we use? What are the typical cases that we'll look at? We do calibration, we do validation with the data. For calibration, we are looking at approach volumes, turn ratios, mid-block speeds. For validation, we are looking at travel times from probe vehicle data or from Bluetooth or other data sets. We're again looking at the approach volumes and mid-block speeds for validation as well. So the data sources for these are usually short-term counts. We could go if there are HPMS detectors available in those zones. You can look at those. Also, when say you have the probe vehicle here in REX, connected vehicle data, and so on. The typical short-term traffic data collection technologies that we have been using in the past are these pneumatic tube counters, inductive loops, manual turn counts, standing at the intersection with a jammer board, collecting the data for over a short period. More recently, we have had seen the use of video cameras for manual or automated post-processing. We have deployments of radar and LiDAR sensors. We could use GPS sensors, Bluetooth-based technology, automated license plate readers. The list goes on. But why do we need one more source of data? Means what's lacking, or how why are we proposing the use of drones, right? Is the advantages here is this kind of gives us data that is not really feasible. The fidelity of the data that's not feasible with the other technologies. We can get data to 30 hertz I've said here, but if you are taking a recording higher resolution like 60 frames per second video, means you can have like 60 hertz data. That gives, like, if you convert say 40 miles per hour to or 60 miles per hour to feet per second, you get what, like 40 or so feet per second. So that you are getting at 30 hertz, you're getting a data point for every 1 to 1.5 feet that a vehicle has moved. So that is high resolution data. Why do we need that kind of data? Means we can look at lane change behavior across, means when exactly are they changing the lane when on an approach to an intersection, say, or are there vehicles that are going over 10 feet before you start the skip line? Are they crossing double solid lines, and so on? You can look at aggressive behavior location. Are the headways between the vehicles very short in some regions? Right? Are there sudden stoppages of vehicles that's happening? Means do we have an issue with a signalization, or in the location of an exit where people are or the drivers are getting some unexpected displaying some unexpected behavior, queue length tracking, speed, acceleration, deceleration profiles, and so on. What are the disadvantages? We are still limited by the amount of time we can have a drone up in the sky. It's totally not, I mean, it's not fully true. Is that there are tethered systems that are available now, which can keep the drone up in the air for almost forever. Those have some limitations of the height you can get. Like with these, we can go up to 300, 400 feet before we run into airspace restrictions. Whereas with the tethered ones, we usually are restricted to like 100 or 150 feet, which is still pretty good for getting a top-down view. But that's there. Other issues that you can run into is obtaining permissions for the base station location. People are not comfortable, or businesses are not comfortable having drones fly over their business. So if they can control it, means if you are trying to stand at a on top of the varsity, we did try that. Means you'll have to obtain permissions from them, and corporate is not too happy to provide those kind of permissions, but just because of the unknown, the unknown, right? That they don't know what's going on with the drones. Also, the last, which is probably true for most of these detection technologies, is these are weather dependent. Means if you have not only rain, but if you have high winds, means that becomes a drain on the batteries of the drones. Means it's hard to keep them still to get a good video out of them. This is a specific example of a drone data collection that we did when we were looking at North Avenue, right across from Georgia Tech in this area. So we're looking at using connected vehicle technologies for doing emergency vehicle preempts and for these hero vehicles that use this location as a turnaround spot for going in the opposite direction for at the connector. So vehicles would exit here, go around, cross the bridge, take a right on Spring Street and take this entrance ramp back onto the freeway going back and north. The problem is this part of the of North Avenue is heavily congested. So we are trying to figure out how to use emergency EVP at the traffic signals to allow the emergency vehicles to go quicker through this interchange. So for this, we were doing a VISM simulation, and for that we needed very or good data for this entire zone. We did just for this part of the road, so we had to go cast a wider net and do the simulation for a slightly bigger area, because it's not just the hero vehicle path that we are addressing here. Means we are also looking at ambulances that come off this and go to Emory right there. So anyway, so this was our data collection plan. We planned on having 6 drones up in the air simultaneously and coordinated so that we can get this entire zone here, all the traffic in that area at the same time. We also deployed, along with the drones, we also deployed several 60 cameras at the different intersections in that area. Means we had like 20 intersections in the network that we were simulating, but each intersection's requirements, we were trying to get the cues at the different approaches. So we had multiple cameras deployed at each of these intersections. So we had the ground cameras for the counts, but then we had the drones to look at the detailed behavior of the vehicles, especially like in this area on the bridge where people pre-position on these lanes, like way up here, because especially those that are trying to make a right here onto the ramp, means they won't be able to get in because the right lane backs up all the way, maybe up to these intersections depending on the day. Also, there's traffic trying to make a left onto this road, so the left turn lane backs up on all the way here. So we're trying to look at this pre-positioning behavior, any kind of aggressive behavior, people trying to squeeze in at the last moment, and so on. Our base station means we tried to go on top of the varsity here. They were not too happy about that, so we ended up going for a small green bit of space on campus here. That's the space. We had 6 operators working there. We didn't know where to get so many people, professional people. Means we have a drone of our own, but and so just with one drone we couldn't do this whole area. So we looked for operators. So thankfully, Georgia has a booming film industry, and that's a lot of drone operators who work on a contractual basis. So it wasn't too hard to get hold of somebody to coordinate multiple drone operators to come in and do the data collection together. So these are the different views we got from the drones. And so again, our target is this path here. So we are trying. It was challenging to get that part. So we had multiple views So on one, we got this part, another, we got this part. So we kind of, the idea was to get these to stitch back together in some manner at the end, in the end. This one gets the whole of the ramp when it backs up all the way there. And so we wanted to make sure we get all the way back there. Other views covering that area, those left turn backups and left turn lane backups and so on. These are the process videos. We'll come back to that in a second. So here are the steps of using that video. So we collected the field videos with the drones. That was by far the hardest part of coordinating, finding a day, time of year when there won't be too many trees on the road, covering the view of the road and so on. But once that's done, there is a service called Data from Sky. There's probably other services like that, or you could do your own processing now that you have all kinds of image processing algorithms, yellow, V, whatever, 11 now, I think. So anyway, we use the service once. It was pretty easy. You get you upload the video and they automatically process it. Depending on the size of the video, you can get that tracking files back from there within a few minutes to a few hours. So what this does is it tracks each of these vehicles for every frame of the video and gives you a location. Now the locations that they give are in XY coordinates relative to the view of the video. So that the next step is to geocode those. So and I'll get that into the geocoding in a second. So, but before you do the geocoding, the next step really is look at a video. I don't know if it will. Oh, there we go. So playing back the video, looking at it, and seeing if there are any issues. Means is every vehicle getting a tag? Are there vehicles that are missing, dropping off here and getting reassigned? Are there issues like that? You want to skim for those. Look at that. The green lines here are the trajectories of the vehicles that you can see. See the left turn, see the right turns, and so on. So once you have done your sanity check here, you can move on to doing the georeferencing. It's fairly simple. Means you find some spots on the road. Preferably like you make a big trapezoid or rectangle on the road system and you give the lat longs of those points, which are easy to identify. You get the exact GPS coordinate of those points, and the viewer software automatically converts your XY as to lat longs, and you get your trajectories in terms of lat long and timestamp. Now, if you are trying to look at the data on a lane by lane basis, like if you want to know which lane and of the approach you are on, and so you have to go beyond what is provided by that software, and you draw your own zones on the map. So we did that. We wrote a small Python script to look at the location relative to the box that's drawn here, and or several boxes drawn here, and convert it and attach an additional attribute, the lane ID, and the direction of approach and so on to the data. What can we do with this? Means we can post process this data for the lane ID attached data to get different traffic metrics such as the traffic speed and densities for different parts of a lane. You can do queue length, saturation, headways, and so on. So this is looking at the speed at on the mid block on the bridge that I showed you. What you're seeing here is the speed at different distances away from the stop bar. So, and you can see that the shape of this of the curve, your distribution changes the further up you are from the stop bar. So it's not a uniform speed, of course, but if even the variation of the speed changes as you look at different parts of the approaches. Maybe a little overkill, but when those kind of insights become useful when you are trying to solve a very specific problem, such as looking at aggressive merges on a certain part of the roadway where you probably have maybe you need to extend the left turn bay a little bit, or things like that. Another one was the departure headways. This and the speeds, those are actually inputs you can use to calibrate your VSIM driver model to fine tune it to do the behavior or simulate the behavior close to what you actually are seeing in the field. So from our drone 1 and drone 2 data, I know it's hard to read. The blue line and the red line there, those are our actual field data. And when we tried to tune our VSIM model to that, means we got this purple line. That means no matter what we did, means what we ended up with was this departure here. Means right here it's pretty close, but at the top end, like for the larger headways, means we were not able to get what we had in the field. So that pointed to a modeling issue. What was happening here was that we had our the stop zone for these vehicles. This extended a little bit into the through movement. So what's happening was these vehicles were, when they were stopping here to look whether they could make the free right turn, they were actually encroaching a little bit, just a little bit, into the through movement. So these vehicles, even when they had the green, as they would come up here, slow down, and this vehicle will go, and then they will go. So there were just a fraction of those vehicles were causing an extra large headway there. So anyway, so we fixed that by pulling that back to the green line. Data fusion, I'll skip this. Now we are pushing against time. So what are the challenges? It's I know so far I've painted a fairly rosy picture of what you can do with the drone data, but it's not without some challenges. And these are some of the challenges we have seen, and I'll go through each of them one at a time. So this is one which I was talking about initially. Like we have to look at what the foliage coverage is, and so you have to kind of pick your season to get the right amount of coverage in the video. So here you'll see that the vehicles IDs are not there anymore. They're getting lost, and I think towards the end, once after they have crossed here, they will get picked up again. On the other side, since our focus was on the vehicles on that side of the road, means we had positioned the drone on the further side so we can get a clear view of that lane. But we were losing this lane. It got re-identified here, but it's a tough job to try to connect those back. Another interesting one was we saw was the jumping of the vehicle ID. So here, and we saw these vehicles. Again, this is a small graph. It's hard to see, but we were seeing speeds of in kilometers per hour. There were like 700 kilometers per hour. And it's like there's no way that's true. So what's happening was these vehicles, which were on the bridge, suddenly they were switching over to a vehicle on the freeway. So it seemed like there was sudden acceleration and a huge speed. So you have to watch out for those kind of things, filter those kind of data out, and so on. This one is, if you are looking to build your deceleration profiles, you might be getting slightly off data, because if you look at this vehicle, the ID of this vehicle is, or this is a better example, is the ID is right there at the top. But then as it slows down, that ID, the location of the dot kind of starts sliding backwards, or it kind of stopped right there while the vehicle is still moving forward. So there was a slight detachment. So if you're, it would seem like that the vehicle had stopped a few feet in front of the stop bar, although the vehicle actually went all the way to the stop bar. So those are very minute details, but depending on the study you're doing, means those might be things to watch out for. This actually is not a fault, but you can see what it does is when the drone is up in the air, means, and it's moving slightly, when the data is processed, the field of view is automatically stabilized. So you get a smaller field of view, but at least your reference point is fixed. So your vehicles are not shifting around in your view as the drone shifts, drone's views. Another issue that we recently figured out, means this is not a drone view, but from One Georgia Center, one of the conference rooms up there. What we saw here was that it's the same. It had to set it up just because of the limitations on how far up the camera could look. And so we flipped the view up, and so this is a flipped view of this. So this is the original video. When we process that, you'll see that there are a lot less red dots there, which means less vehicles have been ID'd, and especially we wanted this ramp, and there were no vehicles identified on the ramp. Although then we flipped the view, and immediately the vehicles were identified, simply because that there is an expectation of a certain angle of the vehicle when they are trying to do the identification of the vehicles with the algorithms. So means the algorithms have been trained to expect the vehicle to look a certain way when the especially in terms of the movement of the vehicle. So the vehicle, if this is moving in this direction, this is the front of the vehicle, there's the back of the vehicle. If it's flipped, it seems like it's moving in the wrong direction. There are a few more applications. I could, maybe I can run through them really fast if you have a couple minutes. 2 minutes, okay. So that was the application. Those were the applications I talked about specifically in terms of simulation data. Means we have also used drones for other applications such as roundabout studies. The process of analysis is pretty much the same. But we have used the software from Data from Sky a little more extensively, where we have defined gates and zones in the view, and it automatically, you can use it more or less like a counter, a detector you can draw on the view, and you will get data in terms of what you normally see. More stuff we've done is like we could do vehicle dynamics analysis with this data. For example, means depending on where the vehicle is within this lane, like how close it is to the truck apron or to the right hand edge of the roundabout, is that we saw that define or that impacts what kind of gaps between these vehicles this vehicle is willing to accept. So when the gap acceptances ratios are better when you have the vehicle closer to the center of the roundabout than. So if they are too close to the right edge, is people are afraid of accepting smaller gaps. They wait for larger gaps. One more application of drones, and we went out in the middle of the night to look at how the illumination levels are at the at roundabouts. So this was part of a safety analysis study where we are looking at the impact of illumination at roundabouts on safety. Think that's a truck template analysis, but that's pretty much it.
Thank you. So I would like to invite the speaker. I'd like to invite the speaker from, and we can take, we have like 10 minutes to take questions. Any questions?
I have a question on the transportation plan. Cool, how you're using a variety of data sets to kind of inform one needs to have next in Georgia. I saw the slide on demand, just like that trips for long term. Demand, the challenge of identifying and prioritizing where new connections may offer value. Wonder, user data. There's a lot of short-term, particular trips that might be a proxy for like the demand might be there. You can't see the engagement data.
Yeah.
Are y'all doing that kind of only?
So one of the slides I mentioned that we compare to the replica data, demand data, we did develop our own demand index internally, and there were several pieces, all the off the top of my head, but several pieces that went into that were kind of like proxies for what, yeah.
Land use data, kind of.
Yeah. Especially for some of the more rural areas, the data doesn't exist for.
Like they aren't there now.
Right.
But they could be.
But it doesn't mean they're not, yeah, exactly. And another piece that we used a lot of kind of like data proxies for was on the bicycle level of comfort. They're both of these are true, like there both isn't a lot of bike infrastructure in some of the rural areas, but also if there isn't data for it. So using
Comfort level might tell you, hey, there's a facility here, but based on its design, it's
Exactly.
underutilized
Exactly.
because.
Yeah.
That's really against the travel lane. It's traffic for 45 miles an hour.
exactly.
But to your point of looking at those short distance trips, not just made by Bike Head, but made by.
The marketing motion, which could be made if the facility.
Yes.
I do have a question for Matt. Maybe you can add into that. So how's the process to actually access the data? If
Yeah.
you can just give your example of how was your experience accessing the data, or you can add.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I appreciate you asking it. So if you like right now, if you want to pull out your phone and use Google GDOT Big Data Program, it'll be the first link that pops up. And you go there and there's a hyperlink that walks you through step by step. This is what you do. Many of you as firms already have access. But if you, and I'll pick on Arcadis, if you have new employees, they have to get approved to use it. And it just means that you just update your license agreement. It's very easy, but again, there's a step-by-step process. Whereas if you work for GDOT, your domain's already been whitelisted, which means that your new employee can go ahead and just create an account immediately. But yeah, it's very, very simple. Again, like right now, pull out your phone, Google GDOT Big Data Program, it'll pop up. ARC also has a link that'll take you directly there. There's a step-by-step guide along with some very helpful resources for trainings, tutorials, you name it, to really make sure that you're getting off to a good start.
And with that, since right now,
Mhm.
what we've done is we have processed outcomes that we can share. And that's kind of what this rural active transportation plan did, was created
And I think what's important for that piece for GDOT and ARC on the replica side, right, is like it's a very expensive license. To provide that, and the way they've set it up is so that any, you know, again, those 50 seats can be given out to anybody and they kind of ration them out to make it work. The way they figure out that they need to get more is that you ask. They don't know, like, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, they don't know the demand until you start asking for it and pestering Ron and pestering me and pestering Sam Harris to get access. And then they will strip the license away from me because they'll say, Matt, you're not using it. You know, someone else gets it now. So, you know, please ask.
And I will say it's been very easy as we've needed to get people signed up, the team at GDOT and Arcadis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It has, it's going for crash data. Is that pulled from gears?
Yeah, so, yeah, there's a link to that. I mean, you can find New Metric and Gears by itself, but the intent was hopefully that could be a one-stop shop for you to find the different things. But yeah, so it is linked to Gears. I think New Metric is the preferred visualization tool just because it's a bit easier to use for the department, but Ron, I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, New Metric cage for years, but they're more useful.
That's what I was thinking.
Little behind, but we're working.
That's
I think behind those two.
But similarly, right, you know, if you were like, oh, where's that website that I can get the continuous count station data? Again, if you just remember GDOT Big Data Program, you'll find all the big sets that GDOT wants you to use. They're all hyperlinked there so that you can find it faster.
Right.
Related to side of state grant, or is it rail to be covered?
It's gonna be a mix. So, yeah, we're looking at in-road infrastructure as well as separate right of way. And it really depends on the context, what's the most appropriate. But, you know, through the trail crossings analysis, we've been looking at those dedicated right of way made to the roadway crossings where the trails cross. But as we're looking at bicycle level of comfort and connectivity, that's the step that we're moving into of determining what is the appropriate type of treatment based on that current level of comfort score. Should it be within the existing roadway or should it be potentially separate?
I'm bringing it up. This a couple of years ago, we were on a FIA project in one new column. Rails wasn't
Yep.
there, and there was an area, we were trying to build a trail, part of a roundabout there. Directly related to the trail project.
That's super helpful throughout this process is kind of staying in touch with like the regional commission across. And at the local level, or if it's, you know, at state. Making sure that everything is working together to kind of piece together the larger, like, you know, zooming back out the connection.
I think we have no problem with it.
Right.
If they do us off.
And some of the existing state bike routes do go, like, I forget the name of the state bike route, but that follows, right along like the Silver Comet Trail. The state bike route technically is the Silver Comet Trail for that portion. So that is obviously the ideal. The ideal facility is a shared use path for cyclists.
That Strava data has really highlighted this. It's where people are actually comfortable riding. It's oftentimes not. It's a parallel facility and you know, that's really what we want. Understand a little bit better so that we're not continuing to try and hammer in bike and ped infrastructure on roadways that folks will never drive.
So one last question for Dr. Ginn. Will you agree that probably the application of the drone technology is more for those very detailed, specific parameters that we want to calibrate for micro simulation, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, the use cases are, maybe I oversold the simulation case, but when said for any kind of analytics of, especially for any kind of driver behavior, or if you have a very focused problem that you're trying to solve, mostly related to driver behavior, that's where the drone becomes very useful, because it lets you break the data into individual vehicles, which and it tracks it over a little bit of space. So you get your detailed time space diagrams that you can break out and use to pinpoint the problem. Of course, and then you can build your simulation and try out different strategies of how to solve that.
Maybe in the future, Gene will include that in the big data package. So that was the last question. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. It's now 10:18. Right now, there's a snack break in vendor time. Also, it will be a good time for the hotel checkout. But next session here will be technical session 4A. Thank you everyone for attending, and just give a interesting line.
Yes.
Yeah. Or to get that updated out, like I came up and I had. I was like, we got money. I didn't actually through cash was the basis for like about. They keep the light up.
Yeah, I do, yeah. No, thank you, yeah.
They're good. I mean, I have those meetings that.
Yeah.
People are.